Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our VASS and Varsity Tutors webinar on implementing district-wide high dosage tutoring. Sorry, I can't talk and admit people here. I'm admitting people in. I'm Amy Griffin, if you didn't already know me, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Virginia Association of School Superintendents. So we're so glad that you joined us today. Varsity Tutors is one of our partners, and we really value what they do, and we're so glad they're going to share with you today this webinar. I want to introduce them. Let me spotlight them first. I'm going to spotlight you all. Let me spotlight. Where did Sarah go? Now that I spotlighted Christina. I'm going to add spotlight. Here we go. Okay, well, I would like to introduce you all to Sarah and Christina. Sarah Marr is the Senior Director of Partnerships at Varsity Tutors. She's an educational expert committed to leveraging technology to transform, I can't talk this morning, K-12 education. With a background as a middle school English teacher in Fairfax County, a Title I director in Baltimore County, and a consultant for the New York City Department of Education, Sarah transitioned to working at ed tech companies in 2014. Since then, she has excelled in strategic partnerships and launching innovative products and services to enhance online learning and expanded educational opportunities for all students. Based in Washington, D.C., Sarah lives with her husband and their 5-month-old son. Outside of work, she enjoys hiking near Great Falls, Virginia, embracing her love for the outdoors and family adventures. So welcome, Sarah. She's going to be our moderator for Varsity Tutors today. And also with us is Dr. Christina Arpante. She brings more than 25 years of experience in education with a background in elementary, middle, high school, and technical college settings. So you have a wide variety of experience. She held roles as a teacher, school administrator, and professional development provider before transitioning to school communications in 2020. Before joining Loudoun County Public Schools, she was the Assistant Director of Communication and Public Affairs for the Santa Clara County Office of Education in San Jose, California. She holds a doctorate in curriculum instruction, a certificate in corporate communication from Cornell, and is currently pursuing accreditation in public relations and project management credentials. So we're so excited that we have you both here, and I'm going to turn it over to you all.
Thank you so much, Amy. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to really discuss and highlight all of Dr. Arpante's incredible work at Loudoun County. We know that division leaders oftentimes are reluctant to embrace new division-wide initiatives for a variety of reasons, but really due to the perceived burden of implementation. However, in Loudoun County, the third largest division in the Commonwealth, thanks to Dr. Arpante's efforts and Dr. Ellis's initiatives, they launched a tutoring program for every single K-12 student with minimal friction, a strong collaboration, and they were able to significantly increase student engagement. And we are very excited to really look at the work today. Hopefully by the end of this webinar, the goal is that you will have actionable insights into the process of onboarding tutoring resources in your division and learn strategies to develop a communication plan that promotes a strong adoption amongst your staff and, just as importantly, families. So I always like to start off with a little bit of the why. So at Varsity Tutors, as experts in tutoring, we know that one-to-one high dosage tutoring works. Research shows that students achieve the highest growth when one-to-one tutoring is pre-scheduled multiple times per week with the same tutor meeting with that student over a set period of time. And so, and working closely with division leaders and research partners like Learn Platform and the UC Irvine Office of Research, we have recent RCT studies that show more than 2 times growth in math proficiency in students who tutored with Varsity Tutors and 40% growth in reading. Now, I say this because high impact tutoring is no stranger to the Commonwealth of Virginia. The DOE has made significant investments in high dosage tutoring while also expanding the Virginia Literacy Act, or VLA. Now, when onboarding new tutoring resources, It is really critical for improving the student outcomes, and we want to ensure alignment to division goals. So when All in Virginia was really announced and launched last fall, Loudoun County recognized the need for robust offerings for every single learner. So, in partnership with Dr. Ellis, the Chief Academic Officer, and her team, they decided that all Loudoun County students should have access to our on-demand 24/7 platform. The tools on the top of the screen here are what's available to students at no cost to divisions in Virginia. But in collaboration, they were really hoping to provide high dosage tutoring support to schools where students may have scheduling conflicts and couldn't receive high dosage tutoring during the school day. So, in partnership, they looked at and have launched parent assigned tutoring, where parents determine the schedules of tutoring for those particular students who do have those conflicts. Now, what we know is when a program is properly onboarded, tutoring programs effectively address learning gaps, they support district equity initiatives, and maximize funding resources like All in Virginia, really honing in on those specific academic needs and targeting those. So we do also know that several, it feels like a daunting task when a division launches something for every single student, especially sizable ones and especially small ones that may not have the internal resources or staffing supports. So challenges like staff buy-in, integrating with existing systems, and also ensuring that resources are utilized, all of those challenges can arise. But really what we want is to make sure that, or we want to be aware that the lower the awareness that these resources have amongst your staff, your community, that reduces the program's impact. So that brings me to Dr. Arpante. We worked in lockstep with Dr. Ellis and Dr. Arpante to provide clear communication to families in Loudoun County. And we did that in order to enhance the long-term success and fully leverage the tutoring program's potential. So here are some of the key dates of the launch. You can see that we launched January 1st, and there were several meetings that we had with Dr. Arpante and Dr. Ellis's team in preparation for this date, in addition to every subsequent date. But the one date I want to point out to you that is going to be of key significance in our conversation today is this June 4th date. This is the parent information session that we collaborated together on in an effort to inform the LCPS community about all of these free on-demand resources that were available to students. So what we saw was the largest spike in usage in Varsity Tutors for Schools history, thanks to a lot of the efforts of Dr. Arpante and the communication plan. So I will pause at this point. Dr. Arpante, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. I want to pause here just to really highlight. I mean, there's a lot of storytelling that comes in the graph and the data right here. I would love, from your perspective, to hear what are some of the key elements in a successful communication plan, specifically the one that you employed leading up to this June 4th parent information session. I'll pause there for you.
Great. Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. So keep in mind, as I kind of share today, everybody comes from different size districts. We happen to have 83,000 students and 100 schools. So the plan that I put together along with Sarah and her team and Dr. Ellis and her team may look different. And, so it's just really important to kind of think about what will work in my role, in my division with my audience, because everybody's audience is different. So I just want to kind of put that out there. Also, keeping in mind that some of you you hold different roles. You may be your communications person, but also be your Title I person and so forth. Thirdly, I bring a different perspective because I'm an educator. So most communications folks don't have school experience. So I do have that lens as well. So sometimes depending on when you're speaking with your partners within your organization, you may or may not have to give a little bit more context, whereas I have that context already. So I just want to put that out there. So when developing this plan with the team, there were several sections or steps that I had to take, including an overview, right? Figuring out what this was. I'm actually, as shared earlier, I'm new to Virginia somewhat, so learning the ways of the world in Virginia, having clear objectives and strategies for the plan. Not a lot of times we go straight to tactics, like the outputs, but we want to know about the outcomes. In addition, really thinking about our audience, a phased rollout, because if we just did everything right at once, we would overwhelm everybody, including staff. So we don't want to do that. Leadership buy-in is key, and we're very fortunate to have Dr. Ellis and her team really help with that phase and the buy-in of our administrators, because again, having 100 schools and 100 administrators, it's a lot of personalities to have conversations, and they all know their schools and so forth. Really utilizing multiple communication plans, and that's knowing your communication channels, really knowing your audience. Clear, consistent messaging, monitoring the process, and really thinking about the changes and continuous improvement. So that being said, I know I just said a lot, but I'm going to go over each of those sections. Really, when we started in January, for those of you who are aware of Loudoun County, we tend to, we've been in the news a little bit in the last couple of years. And so really thinking about in our conversations, how do we not mute those conversations, but really keep them in mind when we're making these strategic, inclusive, and transparent communication plans. Because it will play a role, and that's a part of my risk and mitigation piece I'll speak to later. But really thinking about how the goal was really how to increase awareness and engagement with this free tutoring that was available during structured phases, excuse me. So with phase one, we really focused on, in January, a general resource, like, hey, this is what it is. It was still really new. We understood that we don't know what we don't know yet, if there were going to be any changes from BDOE and so forth. Phase two was really, and we did do some push out and some communication, but it wasn't very robust. It was more than what we had, but it wasn't as robust as we did moving forward. We also did a summer push, which is probably our biggest push after the June 4th webinar. And that was really highlighting specific classes and tutoring opportunities for, okay, we're ending the school year. And now how do we present that, how do we help in an engaging way, help that summer slide, so to speak. And now we're in our phase three of our back to school piece, and really aligning the objectives with our key events and milestones and guiding engagement to build over time. So, this is not something that is a one and done. This is a continuous resource and partnership that we're going to have for several years. So how do we keep it fresh for everybody, so it doesn't become white noise? Oh, here's another social post or so forth. With audience segmentation, really thinking about the diverse needs of our students. So, we have students of all academic levels, of all socioeconomics, and everything. We have the gamut here. So really thinking about how to speak to our parents and our kids and our principals. And so when Sarah was mentioning high dosage and the free, so those we kept them separate. We have a high dosage, which happened in the schools, and it was really specific for students who didn't quite make the cut in their scores. And that communication was very administrator focused, honoring the fact that they know their kids, they know their schools, their schedules, and so forth. So that was that communication. I helped Dr. Ellis craft those messages, and then all those messages came from Dr. Ellis specific because she's our chief academic officer and has a different relationship with the principals. I really took on the division-wide communications. So the leadership buy-in, she also included me, oop, there goes my earbud, sorry. She also included me in a lot of the communications. So my name was really synonymous with her work. So if people did have questions, they could also connect with me. With the communication channels, we have several, and when you're really thinking about your own specific divisions, what do you have that works for you? We have Blackboard mass notifications, which for those of you who know, Blackboard has been purchased by another company, so that's going away in January. So we will shift, but nonetheless, we will have continuous email communications. And with that, we really specified and customized our language. So we did send out a K-12 message, but then we sent out an elementary, a middle, and a high, because those of us who know, there's sometimes a little, people feel some kind of way when a secondary gets an elementary email and vice versa. So we really wanted to make sure that we spoke to every audience. We utilized social media. We utilized our family and staff newsletters. And for me personally, what I found, while those were all super helpful and super useful, we have parent advisory committees that we visited in person and spoke to the parents in person and got their real-time feedback. They had great questions, and we were really able to, with those conversations, inform future communications, which was really helpful. Clear and consistent messaging, really thinking about the what and why, and how do we build understanding and awareness through experience. Really thinking about what do we have to offer. Summer, we really wanted to look at high school and what would our parents want to know about, PSAT, SAT prep, with our littles, our elementary, how do we increase literacy in math, and then middle school, same thing, literacy in math, but how we get them interested in that through the engaging classes with the celebrities and the, and the Minecraft, or whatever it is, the gaming and that type of thing. And then also with the clear, consistent messaging is how do you access this? Right. So this is the important, we have LCPS Go, which is the class link. So you may have a direct go to in your division or your organization. And so a lot of it is what can we do to make the steps easier? So even though if we send an email, we'll get a response sometimes and say, but how do I access? Well, how can we how can we limit that uncertainty and have that information ahead of time? And in multiple channels. So not only did we have it in our office, not only do we have it on the website, but we share that information with schools as well. Also monitoring progress is key, because a lot of times at any plans, and I'm not sure if you all experience this, you have all the plans in action. Even when I was a teacher, we do these lesson plans, but how often do we pause and look at the data at the end? Because and throughout, right? Because we want, if we wait until the end, it's important to look at it throughout as well, so then we can shift and pivot if we needed to, or lift, right, to what was working well. One of the last things was the continuous looking at the challenges and continuous improvement, really looking at that risk and mitigation piece. While we have had tremendous success, and I truly, this is my personal opinion, I worked with a lot of partners, and this partnership and collaboration has been one of the best with Varsity Tutors, because I think that they get it, they know what they do, and they honored the work that we did. So I think that was really amazing, and they were true partners. And one of the things what happened was, since they know their platform, they know their classes, their team provided me with language. So I said, okay, here are the, I think it was the 5 to 8 classes that we really want to highlight. Tell me what they are. And then I took that language and I tweak them for our guidelines, our how we communicate, to get into the weeds a little bit, AP format, no Oxford comma, that kind of thing. And so they took the language, they gave me the language, I edited it for our audience, which was hugely impactful because a lot of times I'm writing what's going out. And so it really saved time. Also, in one of the challenges was really navigating that political climate, which is unrelated to this, right? Unrelated to tutoring resources, but to pose challenges, and really thinking about how do we continue our student forward messaging and saying, just kind of saying, just let's focus on the students. This is what's important. So really, I know that was a lot of information, but really thinking about those pieces of communication of what are your objectives, who is your audience, what's the phased rollout, the leadership buy-in, the communication channels, messaging, and measuring progress. If and when you're choosing to move forward with this, really thinking about what will work for your organization and what works in the phases. So just because we did this over the last 8 months doesn't mean that you may or may not be able to do as robust of a plan, but really thinking about your audience. How do you go student forward messaging, and who can you get in your world and in your role to really support the work? Because doing this in a one-man shop is difficult. It was, it's challenging, and we have a team here. This was, I was the lead on this, but it was also took a village, right? We have somebody who does social media, so I had to meet with social media and the newsletter and so forth. So I think all this to be said, just really knowing your why, knowing your students. If we took it on as a K-12 initiative, depending on if you have that capability. If you choose to go that way, or if you choose to go another way, keeping those communications regular and collaborative with Varsity Tutors, it was super helpful. And they also honored the fact that I'm a little, creature of habit. I have a way to do a plan. Not every communicator has, they all have their own plan, but I think, Sarah, do we have a link to, so this slide right here is a general overview of what my doc looks like. Some people have communication, tools. They have project management tools. The way I work, I'm all about Google. This is just a personal preference. This is a Google Doc that we have, that I have, and I think that we're going to put it in the chat for you if you are interested. But basically, it's a Google Doc that goes over the key messaging and objectives, so you have it up in the front. And then I outline some of the messaging, and these are all internal links. So I find, me personally, again, having everything in one document really helps to navigate, and you can tag other people to say, hey, review this, or hey, here's the newsletter, and so forth. So this was helpful. I shared this with Varsity Tutors. They had access to this, so they could see what we were doing. The only thing that wasn't really linked to this were the images, which is linked somewhere else in our drive. But this was helpful to us. So I'm going to pause there because that was a whole lot of conversation and went against everything in my teacher instinct of not talking so much. So I apologize.
It was great. No, I think Dr. Aponte, that was like a really wonderful overview of everything and provided a lot of direction for folks. I want to get a little bit more granular. So just because I know the experience of what you did specifically and how it impacted not only the parent attendance and that parent information session on June 4th, but then following that June 4th parent information session, we immediately saw a spike in student engagement on the platform using chat, homework help-based tutoring supports, essay reviews, those live courses that are of high interest that focus on, trying to avoid that summer slide was the goal that you mentioned a second ago, but also supporting college and career exploration. So talking about that, I want to focus a little bit more specifically on the communication channels that you used. I know living in the digital world today, emails tend to get pushed into the delete box or the spam box if I don't want to receive communications from a person. So emails may not be the most effective way of reaching community, your parent community specifically. So what were some other effective communication channels that you all used in really engaging the community leading up to that June 4th parent information session that was so widely attended and yielded really good results?
Thank you for that. And yes, we, especially with a division our size, and if you think, because we have this discussion all the time. So if I'm a parent and I have a child in elementary, middle, and high school, all those messages that I'm getting from the division, that I'm getting the school, and that I'm getting the PTA or PTSO. So yes, to your point, absolutely. They are, and that's a constant struggle that we're working on, is how do we really streamline that communication. But with social media specifically, we used Facebook, and we also used X. We don't use X as much because our audience that we're looking for are not on X. I mean, they're really not. So X and some Instagram, but really the major push was on Facebook, and we did a Facebook ad and we did a Facebook event. We find a lot of success in Facebook events because people will click it, and then even if they forget about it, Facebook sends you a, hey, don't forget, you have this event coming up. So that was really helpful. So we did that. We also, part of our communication plan was I drafted text for principals and a graphic. And I said, hey, when you send out your weekly newsletter or whatever your communication is, please put this in your newsletter. And you don't have to do anything. You just have to cut and paste it. Because as a former principal, I know that I might have had every good intention of doing that, but I don't have time to write it, right? So doing everything else. So that was very helpful. We also did a monitor slide that they could put on their front monitor, or they could print out and put on their front office desk. So those were some, really making sure that not only are we sending things out division wide, but how can we get this messaging to the school with limited interruption of what they already do? Like, we don't want to put more work. As a principal, I used to say, if I'm adding something on somebody's plate, what can I take off? Not always, not always reality. However, what I can do is provide this messaging for you. So we did that. What else did we do? We also made sure that we put it in the school board update, and we did the same thing that we did for the schools for our school board. We have several school board members who send newsletters out, and so we provided that language for them, so they could just cut and paste, and we could be the one sharing the narrative, and there's no mistake about how we want to make the communication move forward.
That's fantastic. Now I know as we look forward, and I'll go back to this this timeline slide here. So as we look at the engagement on this data, we can see after that parent information session leading into the summer, we saw that spike. And then kind of as we all expect, and as, especially coming from the Varsity Tutor side, we also expect that to drop off at some point during the summer. But what we've noticed since going back to school is that, again, that increase in engagement and usage. So my question really is around the feedback and the feedback loop and how that has refined your communications plan. I know collaboratively, we are looking forward to another parent information session this upcoming semester. And so as we continue to, or as you continue to engage the school communities, how has that feedback loop helped shape what you plan to do? I mean, we were pretty successful this first go around, which is awesome.
Yes.
So are there additional things that we're looking to really hone in on this time around?
Well, I think it goes back to we didn't know, well, I didn't know, or we didn't know what we didn't know. And it was trial and error a little bit in the beginning. Again, for multiple reasons, several things that were not in our control. And so really thinking about going back to what is in our control, what can we help really drive? I think what helped us, and this is just my perspective, is everything that was related to these online resources through Varsity Tutors, we directed them to Varsity Tutors. So we, even though we projected the information, we shared the information, really thinking about the fewer clicks, the better, the fewer asks, the better. So while we have a website, everything, if questions came up, we really in our webinars, we said, if you have questions, go here, and it's to Varsity Tutors. And then we worked together to provide those answers. And I think that was key, because if Varsity Tutors didn't know the answer, right, because they're not in our everyday division, they just shot me an email or Dr. Ellis an email, they would get the answer, and then they would answer it. So I think that was hugely successful, because you're not saying, oh, I don't know, contact this person. And that really frustrates parents. It frustrates humans in general, right? So I think that was huge. I also, having me or a representative from the division in the webinar, not that we spoke, we were behind the scenes, but I think it was the first or second webinar, or all of them, I don't know, if questions came up and I could just pop in, I could just unmute and say, hey, it's, click link is really our LCPS Go, and if so if there's some language challenges, or just, crisscross, because again, everybody has their own vernacular in their own division, that was really helpful. And then, so I think those were the two pieces, the communication loop, and then just really being responsive. We had a lot of questions, and even though our Blackboard message is a no reply email, it comes to me and I reply, because that helps. And then I always say, this is a general mailbox, and to answer your question. And so, because the truth of the matter is, people are going to read, in communication land, you put what people want to know in the first paragraph, and then all the other stuff. And usually they don't get to the bottom where it says, for more information, contact. So just really honoring the fact that parents are busy folks too. And while, we may have objectives, and we may have assumptions about what we think people are going to do, just knowing that our parents are parents, and, they want to do what's best for their kids. And sometimes we're going to have to do an extra step to make sure that our objective is met.
Yeah, perfect. As we look at, effective onboarding. So we've talked a lot about the family engagement, because the dynamics of the on-demand platform access has really been focused on students and student engagement. And since it is on demand 24/7, a lot of the resources that will be most helpful to students are outside of the classroom. Similarly, the way we support with our high dosage tutoring initiatives that LCPS has around all in Virginia, and focusing on scheduling conflicts that may exist at the school level. Again, looking at parent engagement. So the lens of today has really been focused on that parent engagement and communications plan. But you did mention earlier that there was efforts at the school-based level to inform principals. And what are some helpful tips and tricks that you might recommend to folks about engaging with their school communities as they roll out or consider rolling something out so robust? I mean, we've engaged more than 80,000 students across LCPS. That's incredible. And that isn't without going to the school leaders as well. So I didn't want to forget about important school administrators.
No, thank you for that. I believe, if I remember correctly, going back to January, it really started early, and before we even reached out to the public and to our families, we communicated with our principals. We have senior staff meetings and principal meetings regularly. So Dr. Ellis shared with them ahead of time. And first it was hey, this is coming, this is coming out. So you may see communications moving forward to, hey, this is here's an action item. before a next meeting. So we did a phased approach with administrators, just as we did with families, which was key. And then really sharing that information and the language with high dosage tutoring, which is separate from this piece, even like the letter, and it said, here are the steps that need to happen. Here's who you go to if you have questions. And so really making it, for lack of a better word, simple and just direct. And this isn't, with the wording, this is not something we're doing to you. This is something we're doing for you. And really our philosophy here, and I appreciate this as a former principal, let's communicate with the leadership before you send mass messaging out, because nobody wants to be bamboozled. And also giving them FAQs, right? So here are the questions that you may receive from staff. Here are some questions that you may receive from your community. Here's the community that you can post on your website that we've already posted. Here are the FAQs that you can go through in a staff meeting that take less than 5 minutes. So those kind of things are really, were really, I think, helpful and on because again, we have 100 principals. So it's not that, we can necessarily go out to every school in a week, because it's just not realistic.
Right, absolutely. And I think looking at the size of Loudoun County, to your point, 100 principals, over 100 schools and folks to engage with, that's a lot of planning and preparation that goes into the gradual release almost of information and getting the word out. So it's really something to celebrate. Well, with that, I think we can move into some, really focusing on like actionable steps for the divisions who are in attendance. We can look at any questions. We can take questions from the audience if there are any. So we have expert Dr. Aponte here. I want her to be able to provide as much targeted feedback and support as possible to folks. And so with that, I guess if there are any questions, I haven't been monitoring the chat, but I know Lindsay has been, so we can open it up. All right, we have one. Let's see. You mentioned monitoring progress. How did you measure the impact of the tutoring program, student engagement, and learning outcomes?
So I think this is two-tiered, where I'm going to throw it back to you in a second, Sarah. But so from our standpoint, we looked at analytics. And then from those analytics, we then had conversations with Sarah and her team, because registrations and clicks and signups all went through Varsity Tutor. So that was where it was really important that then we communicate, because there's all this data coming in that we can't see. So I'm going to go back to Sarah, and then, it was that constant communication, and a lot of the specific student data, Sarah engaged with Dr. Ellis specifically, our CAO, because then she could help, because I always informed Dr. Ellis, and we communicated. But again, we looked at social media analytics, and then the Blackboard analytics and that type of thing, and open rates. And then we communicated those to Sarah. But then as far as engagement, Sarah, I'm going to go back to you.
Yeah, and then I think that's a really good point when you're evaluating the effectiveness from your social media campaigns. I think that data, I'd almost like to redo this slide with this data view and show this data view and then your engagement with social media kind of overlapping it or on top of it, because I think that tells like a complete story of not only the efforts of social media campaigns and the successes, the clicks, the open rates, et cetera. But then here we actually see the student engagement. And what is not shown here, the different colors are aligned to different tools that are available to students in our platform. So the 24/7 chat-based tutoring, the essay review that students can submit any writing sample and get feedback from our tutors, live classes, the diagnostic assessment, and then practice problems that students can engage in. So with that, when we have seen that spike, we shared back with Dr. Arpante and Dr. Ellis that, how did your social media campaign go? Because so far the engagement seemed to be really effective. Whatever you did to yield parent involvement for the parent information session, it worked. I mean, the months following that, we just saw such spikes and increased engagement that it allowed us to kind of say, hey, this is going to be sustained engagement over time, thanks to that social media campaign and the additional efforts internally to engage stakeholders.
That's a
Perfect.
great question. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, great question. All right, here we go. What challenges did you face during this process? Did you face any or receive any pushback from administration? And if so, how did you overcome that?
So yes, we did have challenges, and I reflected when I was preparing for today, and one of the things that a communicator should always do in a communication plan is look at risk and mitigations. And I did not do that up front. I did it later. But I think some of the challenges, one, as I mentioned, I think earlier, is really thinking about how do we get that communication out and not be overshadowed or overtaken by the trolls on social media, the negative fodder, how do we not have them connect tutoring to something else that they don't have anything? So that's why we really kind of stuck to Facebook and really kind of try to stay away from Twitter. As far as the administration, what was key was there's not a lot for them to do. It wasn't something that the teacher had to do. On-site tutoring with the high dosage is fantastic. There is some work and some interactions that need to happen through teachers and the administration. It was, here's the information. Now, all we're asking you to do is publicize it. So and believe it or not, even with that, there were challenges with how we communicate it. We had to keep reiterating because sometimes people don't believe that. Are you really saying that? Yep, you don't. I think, and then some of it was really sharing with principals and communicating to teachers how this is really supplementing, not supplanting what they're doing. And really, especially with the engagement classes, this is what helps get kids excited. And then some of the questions that we shared with principals, hey, here are some, for those students who are engaging with Varsity Tutors, here are some questions. Oh, did you take an engagement class? What is engagement to you? So we gave them some reflection, more SEL kind of questions to support as well. But pushback from teachers, saying, oh, well, is this something else for the teachers? And I think really those two were really the only challenges because of the communication. I have to say we didn't really have a lot. And then just some technical, right? So we had some Zoom technical problems in the beginning, but we ironed them out, and then we had a second one, and that was we fixed that. The one challenge too that we had was in our parent advisory group, we have what's called LEAF. It's the Loudon Education Alliance for Families. So it's a school board advisory committee that my office supports. And we're not quite there at 100% yet, but we have a representative from every school that is supposed to take the information, and that's supposed to be a two-way communication alliance where they bring us what's going on at their school community and challenges, and then they take our information and take it back. So one of the challenges was not having parents say, well, my child And while their child is important, we're talking about the school community. So, and then getting that information from our advisory group to the community was a bit of a challenge. And to be honest, that's a challenge we get with everything that we do with all our agendas. So we're working on that this year. So we can, because it would be great if our parents share the information, because parent to parent, it's just like when we have kids, we could tell our kids something and they disagree, and then their friends say something the same exact way, and the kids are like, okay. So, that kind of thing.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to continue being, oh, wait, I think we have one more question. Okay. Have you received any feedback from families since onboarding the program?
We haven't on our end too much. A couple of times we've gotten response to the no response Blackboard message that says, thank you, my child has, enjoyed the enrichment classes. I did get a couple during the summer that because they could do it online if people travel, right? Regardless of where they travel, they can engage. So we did receive a couple of people that said this was really helpful during traveling, during long rides or that type of thing. But other than that, we haven't gotten too much. I haven't gotten too much feedback. And that's actually one of those things that really thinking about monitoring progress and continuous improvement. I think that that's something that is on Sarah and my radar this year to really get some more really qualitative, more than quantitative feedback from our families. So thank you for that question. A good reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point, a lot of the beneficial use cases of those enrichment classes was during travel time or during summer to supplant screen time. Students might be sitting in front of video games or the TV. Hey, instead, like take a coding class, or engage in some sort of, I know one of the highest, the most engaged class over the summer was called Fundamentals of Fractions, Multiplication and Division. Go figure, kids were engaging in math in a fun way. That was the #1 most attended class by students in Loudoun County this summer. So there are a lot of really interesting use cases. Obviously, I think the second one was like an 8-week SAT prep class. So there's a wide variety of ways that students can engage, but it was really cool to see those, in a more academic setting. Okay, the last question for you is what lessons did you learn from the initial stages of implementation that you would recommend to other divisions so that they can hopefully avoid any potential roadblocks?
A great question. I don't know. So I think about on the back end, who is involved with the discussion? And not only who is involved, but who has a pulse on the community. And not only from an administrative point of view, and when I mean administrative, I mean from like central office, right? Because a lot of times central office, people feel some kind of, have a perspective about central office. So really, who can you engage with internally who has a pulse on, and not only on the pulse of the community, but if you don't have a communicator like me who has an education background, who can you enlist to help with that communication? And how can you tie in what you're doing? So, we knew that SAT prep was important. Or to Sarah's point, if that, if you're looking at scores and that fractions are just a hurdle for kids, how can you tailor that messaging? So I think that is one of the key things that I think really collaborating internally and getting all your ducks in a row, whatever those ducks are. They may be 1 or 2 ducks, and they may be a whole, family. I don't know what is the family of ducks. So, and really phasing out that plan and my suggestion is being realistic with your division, your workload, and the temperature of your climate. So whether that's staff, if you know that principals are just overwhelmed, they may not be in a place to be able to even hear the messaging as much as you're saying, we're doing it for you. You know what? That's not in my purview right now. I don't want to hear it. So really, I think understanding your division and the temperature of your division before even rolling that out. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's perfect. That's
Okay.
great. Um, and before we kind of do our closing remarks and wrap some things up, I also just want to kind of pinpoint some of the action items or takeaways that you've prepared for folks. I know you touched upon your communication plan in Google Doc form that I believe was shared in the chat earlier in the presentation. But I just want to highlight it again because it does really showcase all of the different components of a successful plan that you put in place. Let's see. Oh, perfect. Thank you. You included it in the chat. So any of our attendees can go ahead and click on it. There will also be, we'll also share this as a takeaway following as well, as a leave behind material. I also just want to kind of highlight some of the really key things that we discussed today. So first of all, we looked at integrating and implementing a division-wide tutoring program in a lot of different facets and engaging a lot of different stakeholders, the importance of it. And then Dr. Arpante, you did such an incredible job highlighting a lot of the best practices that you employed that really led to a successful spring launch of division-wide access to a platform that supports tutoring initiatives, in addition to really targeted interventions with high dosage tutoring through the All in Virginia plan. So I hope that all of our attendees today walk away with a really strong understanding of how to successfully launch, who to engage with, how to tailor it to their own unique needs, and also the supports that you provided. Thank you so much for supporting our Virginia Commonwealth community with that comprehensive communication plan that they can have as a takeaway.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And I hope, yeah, I know it was a lot of information, but I hope you were able to take some nuggets, and I look forward to hearing about other people's successes, other division successes.
Yeah, and I would just like to thank Lindsay from Varsity Tutors, who's kind of behind the scenes. You don't even see her. She's in the background there, and she's been help coordinating this. And Sarah, thank you. A great job moderating. But Christina, just great information. A lot of times when these initiatives come about or programs are put in place, we forget all about the importance of a communication plan, really thoughtful. How are you going to roll this out so it is successful? And how do you communicate to all your stakeholders? I think if we did more of that, we'd have more success.